The curtains had fallen on the first tournament. Our heroes were defeated, some more than others. But months passed, they trained, they changed. And if Vtuber Battle Royales are to be the modern gladiatorial sports, then the show must continue. 20 new teams of your favorite Vtubers joined again in a battle to the death against one another. Only one would survive, only one would be crowned the Apex champion. It was time for the second Vtuber Apex Legends Battle Royale tournament. This tournament, like the first one, was organized by Vtuber and Apex Predator Shibuya Hall, and featured a similar scoring system. Kills would give your team points, but placement was where most of the score came from, especially if you could survive up to the top 5. The tournament would feature a total of 5 games and would be played on Apex's shiny new map, Olympus. But one thing had changed drastically this time around. Compared to the first tournament, where some of the teams were obviously stacked, this tournament did a way better job at making sure that the players were more evenly distributed skill-wise. And part of this required inviting more casual players to fill the teams out, which also solidified that while being a tournament with stakes and a prize in the form of a high-spec gaming PC, this was also meant to be a fun, more casual tournament, if such a thing even exists. This time around we got many more members of Hololive production participating, and once again I'll focus on them for this video. It's also worth noting that more balanced teams also means that each team becomes more relevant, and so this time around I'll introduce nearly every single team in the tournament. So, here we go. Let's start with our protagonists, the teams from Hololive Productions. Team Happy Set disbanded after the first tournament. They most likely did so to accommodate the Hololive girls who would be participating in this new tournament for the first time. The first Happy Set remnant would be Team Tomasugo, featuring Natsuhiro Matsuri, who was here to get her revenge for the last tournament, Kaga Sumire, one of the girls from Team GG, one of the best teams in the first tournament, and none other than Tokoyami Toa, Hololive's demon girl who was as angelic as ever. With 3 Apex addicts in the same team, expectations for them were high. The second fragment of Happy Set would form Team Bamboozle, composed of Roboko-san, the high-spec gaming robot, everyone's best friend Shirakami Fubuki, and Kurumi Noa, another former member of Team GG. By the way, this team was named Bamboozle in homage to one of Apex's characters, Mirage, who is Fubuki's favorite and the only character she ever plays. While our friend is less experienced in Apex than most of the other Hololive girls, she was eager to do her best, and her team certainly could not be written off. After all, Noa is one of the best players in the whole tournament, holding the rank of Master, meaning she's in the top 0.2% of players. The final remnant of Team Happy Set was Nakiri Ayame, who picked up her Apex mantle once again to participate in the tournament. Her team, Puicure, featured Hololive's snarky witch Murasaki Shion and her friend Utsutsu Yomi. They are the team that reminds me the most of the Star Sweepers from the first tournament, in the sense that, regardless of the tournament's outcome, they were happy just to be having fun together. Sadly, our controller boys would not come back to participate in this one, not having been invited this time around. The Lex HoloPro team featured our winning song, the one and only Yuko Kurobo, as well as Meika and Inui, who you might recognize as being a certain Primate's teammates in the first tournament, and the 3 of them formed Team Kansai Noises. True to their name, this team was loud and proud, full of banter, but also was surprisingly one of the more strategically minded teams, thanks to Inui and Meika's experience. And that leaves us with the final HoloPro team. Last but definitely not least, 2 members of the legendary Chibi Stars would return to form Team Lag, Esto and Izuru, the 2 Apex aficionados. Bearing the same fire in their hearts that led them to the 5th place in the last tournament, they would this time be accompanied by Hololive's pizza-loving dad Arurandis, as Kira, the final member of the Chibi Stars, had unfortunately graduated after the first tournament. While Arurandis is a relative beginning in Apex Legends, he was coached fiercely by Esto and Izuru, and was ready to give his all. Aston himself didn't hold back either. Prior to the tournament, he did 2 358 kill endurance streams with Izuru, then followed those up with a whopping 11 days in a row where he did a 100 kill endurance stream every single day. Having been so close to the top in the first tournament, nobody was more fiercely intent in winning than this seaweed-haired man. Now let's do a quick introduction for the most important known Holo Pro teams. Team Big Star, composed by Toa's friend Ichinose Uruha, Raid, and Matt. These 3 girls were the favorite team for winning the tournament. Team I Pass You Jumpmaster, featuring Minato Minami, Koukaku, and Shishigami Leona. The 3 are great players, especially Leona, with skills and a drive to win that you would expect from a lioness. Team I Didn't Do Anything, a trio of Niji-sanji Vtubers featuring Ibrahim, Ratna, and the returning Apex addict Yuki Chihiro. Team Deep Kiss Club, made of Sasaki Masaki, Japanese warlord Oda Nobunaga, and Niji-sanji's Kanae. You might have noticed that this time around, Kanae was separated from his BFF Kuzuha, who was in a team of his own, Heroes of Bloodsuck and Immortal. Team NJY, another Niji-sanji trio, this time with Seto Miyako, Kanda Shoichi, and Sakura Ritsuki. Team Ato Powerful, featuring Kisaki Anko, Humavat, and Paikao, the latter being one of the former members of Team Tokyo Schooltown, the winners of the first tournament. And last, but definitely not least, we have him. The Primeval Primate, the Chimp Champion, the Monkey Menace. Virtual Gorilla was here once again to strike fear into the hearts of every other team. Last time he single-handedly eliminated every Holo Pro team, and this time he has returned more powerful than ever. Being the only participant in the tournament to hold the rank of Apex Predator, meaning he's literally one of the best 500 players in the entire world. His presence alone was overwhelming. To counteract this, his team, Gorimer, is composed of Hinokuma Ren and Kazami Kuku, some of the least experienced members in the whole thing. This was done as a measurement to put a handicap on the gorilla, but we'll have to see if it worked. And that was it for a very long list of teams. As you can see, we have many more relevant players this time around, which would make for a more exciting and balanced tournament. Again, there are teams I didn't mention in this video with excellent players, but they will have to be glossed over for the sake of keeping any semblance of brevity. The day had finally arrived. This tournament was more hyped up than the first, and everyone had a mix of nervousness and excitement in their minds. No matter if there were grizzled veterans from the first tournament or newcomers, it all would come down to who was left standing. Our teams strapped themselves in, put on their war faces. It was time for Game 1 to begin. As I previously mentioned, this time the tournament took place on Apex's new map, Olympus, the floating city in the sky. Game 1 had the ship going over oasis and heading towards Grow Tower. Now, this time around all the teams would drop more or less in the same location for every match. Early fights in Apex Legends usually aren't very fun for anyone, since they become a battle for whoever can get a gun first and can be pretty random instead of skill-based. To counteract this, the teams had an unspoken agreement to drop in the same places each time, to guarantee no extremely early fights. Team Bambuza would be making their drop at Orbital Cannon. Lag would drop at Solar Array. The girls from Puicure would drop at Grow Tower. Tomasu Go chose to drop at Elysium, and Team Kansai Noises dropped at Carrier. The first few minutes of the match were very quiet. Being the first game of the night, everyone was a bit nervous and playing conservatively. This had teams carefully looting, gearing themselves up with their favorite equipment and rotating to the circle very carefully. But as we all know, peace never lasts long. The boys from Team Lag started heading towards Grow Tower, and Fubuki's team Bamboozle had the same idea. It wasn't long before these two Holo Pro teams found each other, and a shootout began. Estel quickly decided to attempt a push to take the girls down.
これ絶対右に戻る。右生身入ってる。右生身入ってる。はい。うわ、裏から撃たれた。9炊きながらシールド巻きます今。こっち逃げてるわ。一瞬戦闘参加できない。一人割った。はい、戻ってきた。ミラージュ割れてる。あ、これ別から。オッケーオッケー。同じ。
Despite heavily damaging all of them, Team Bamboozle managed to ultimately escape, thanks to an early call to fall back as soon as they found themselves potentially outmatched. Astute viewers are probably asking themselves what happened to Puicure. Didn't it drop at Grow Tower? Well, yeah, they did. But Ayame and Shion had trouble setting up their streams up, and as such decided to chill and just hide on top of the towers while they ran some troubleshooting. The Bamboozle vs Lag shootout happened just a few meters away from them, but they totally ignored it and also weren't found out. Meanwhile, Team TMS was running around at Rift to the north side of the map. As they looted, they started getting shot. But something was off. Those shots were too accurate. This immaculate aim, this precision fire from so far away, taking down Matsuri in just a matter of seconds. This was no man or woman. This could only be the virtual gorilla. With his apex predator might, he effortlessly picked off Matsuri and Sumire, leaving Toa to run away on her own instead of risking an early elimination. Fortunately, she did manage to pick up her teammates' banners, which gave her the ability to respawn them further down the road. Estel's team chased the Bamboozle girls up to gardens, but fearing a third party, they decided to stop and set up camp for a while. The girls, trying to run away and heal after their fight with Team Lag, unfortunately got themselves on a crossfire with two other teams. Down in life and in a bad position, Fubuki and Roboko would also be taken down, leaving Noah to fend for herself. Fortunately, like Toa, she also managed to grab her teammates' banners. Team Lag, after taking potshots at nearby teams, noticed a big fight nearby and attempted to push to get some third-party eliminations. Unfortunately, their lack of discipline would become evident as Estel attempted a push that was way too risky and ended up being downed. Surrounded by teams at all sides, Arurendis also went down, and Izuru ended up with being the sole survivor, making it 3 Holopro teams that were down to their last member. While this was happening, Noah managed to sneak into a remote location and resurrect both of her teammates. Unfortunately, the respawn beacon was in the way of the circle which was fast approaching, and Fubuki didn't manage to outrun it, dying just after being respawned, forcing Roboko and Noah to keep a low profile on the edge of the now relatively small circle. And this is where things started to go from bad to worse for the Holopro teams. Something I've neglected to mention so far was Team Big Star. Like I said before, they were the favorites to win this tournament, and with good reason. Uruha was not messing around. Sure, the gorilla might be the apex predator, but like I mentioned in the previous video, Apex is a team game. You're not getting very far if you don't have a team that can back up your plays, even if you're one of the best players in the world. The gorilla was placed with 2 of the least experienced players in the tournament, and this was hindering his performance. Not that he cared, mind you. Virtual Gorilla is a gentleman and an absolute sweetheart. Through the whole thing, he did his best to coach his teammates and make sure they were having a good time, while he massacred some people by himself. But Team Big Star had 3 great players, and they were all working in sync with each other. And when a team works well together, it's a whole different ballgame. Team Big Star was absolutely dominating, having gotten more than 10 kills already by this point in the game, and they weren't about to stop there. The first victims were Team Puicure, who were still undergeared from having to AFK for the first minutes of the match. Uruha and her team passed through them like a raging storm, leaving no survivors.
一回離れるわ。
うん一回逃げるか逃げていいよ。ちょっと逃げれないかも。
これシオン来てる。
やばいめっちゃ追いかけてるめっちゃ追いかけてる。来てる来てる来てる来てる。あー
いや
ごめん。
あービッグか。
Next, they found Izuru trying to hide, and took the last of the boys down. That was all of the Holopro teams killed. All except for one. I've yet to mention Team Kansai Noises, and I did so for a reason. They were playing very carefully, using Crypto's droning ability to scout out areas ahead, and managed to avoid all conflict so far. But this can't go on forever. With the circle now extremely small and with a whopping 22 players still alive, there were people trying to kill them everywhere. Try to hold on as they might, they ended up being taken down in a crossfire while trying to push a team that had a better position.
中だ77やりますか俺あんまない
これ上登れめっちゃ上登って上登って上登って
ついてきる裏もついてきる上かいるとフォーカス買ってないうまいこと
いや申し訳ない申し訳ない
生き延びてください
すまね
了解了解了解了解はうわごめんマジでごめん
いやーナイフアイスごめんなさ
いやーすまね
い回復物資苦しかったな
No Holopro teams remained, but the match still went on. These final circles were some of the most chaotic I've ever seen in Apex Legends. There were some people getting shot and down everywhere. Explosions and toxic gas clouds made it so nowhere was really safe. In the middle of this chaos, any sort of strategy becomes useless, and everyone was just fighting to survive. Getting caught in the middle of this whirlwind, Uruha's team Big Star would end up being taken out by team I Pass You Jumpmaster, led by Leona, who was playing the area denial specialist Caustic, whose poison gas was proving to be immensely powerful. The final fight was between her team and Team NJY. Unfortunately for Leona, despite having the territorial advantage, she ended up tragically running out of ammo, and with the circle closing in, victory was ultimately achieved by Team NJY. While NJY might have gotten the first place, it's important to remember that kills serve as a point multiplier for the tournament score. This placed Team Big Star at the very top, having obtained among all members a whopping 19 kills. They practically killed 1/3 of the server on their own. But this was not going to discourage their rivals. Matsuri might have gotten a few flashbacks to Team Happy Set's performance in the first tournament, and Asto might have been really annoyed at himself for dying like he did, but they all ended up shaking it off. It was only the first game of the night. They just had to keep their heads up and head to game 2. The second game had the ship passing over orbital cannon. All of our teams dropped at their predetermined spots with no setbacks. Right from the get-go, Asto decided to make a repeat of his strategy in the first tournament, trying to get some early kills. Him and his team decided to take hold of a favorable sniping position near Bonsai Plaza, but found it already occupied. In a display of more level-headed thinking, Asto decided that assaulting a position on the high ground would be too risky, and so they backed off. Meanwhile, Team Puicure, who was having a lot of fun bullying an innocent robot, found an enemy team and decided to engage. This battle fell short, however, as with the approach of a third team, things started getting a bit too spicy, and the girls decided to flee, so as not to get eliminated in an early crossfire.
ウルト投げます
ポータル入った私敵の。
オッケーなんか敵の
え、戻った。別の部隊って言ってるから家の中戻るわ。
戻るオッケー気をつけてね入る
By this point, Team Leg had already rotated to the helipad near Hammond Labs, where they found some enemies and went for a quick coordinated push before they could set up their defenses.
3人入った3人入った
レース割れてる105
レースやったレースやったレースやったレースやったレースやったレースやった
ナイス
下降りて下降りて下降りて下降りて下降りて下降りて起こしてるよ多分起こしてるよ
スキャン入れるよおい 下からも来てるぞ。
ジブ必死必死。
オッケー。燃えてる燃えてる。ジブ。
ジブダウン。
They managed to take 2 of the members down, but the third scurried away before they could get them. Still, they won the fight and obtained a favorable position for themselves. Most teams by this point in the game was still looting, and most players seemed extra cautious, especially with Big Star's massacre in the first round. Team TMS Go, who had been looting, was approached by an enemy. At first they seemed to be a solo, but their team followed right behind him. It was Team At Powerful, led by Pekeo. The girls had them cornered inside of a building in the closing ring. With a coordinated push aided by an airstrike called by Sumire, Toa went in and scored a triple kill.
やったよやったよ。ちょっと落ち着いていこう。一人上ホライゾン無視でいいよ。
これさ、前詰めないと。
前詰めるよ音は。
仲間のやつね。
これ起こしてるね。
なんか家の人投げるよ。
一人やった
別来た、別来た、別来た、別来た。
了解了解了解。
3人やっといた。
ナイス。
Before they could celebrate their victory though, another team approached from behind, trying to get a third-party elimination. Matsuri and Toa managed to run outside of the ring to safety, but Sumire, having been ambushed, didn't make it. Fortunately, Toa would be able to return and get her teammate's banner. Team Puikur had fled all the way to Bonsai Plaza, but found themselves in a pickle. They were being shot by a team in the sniper position that Asta wanted to take early in the match, and being sniped by another team from the bottom of the hill. Tragically, these snipers were none other than Team Bamboozle. Fubuki took down Yomi with precision charge rifle shots, while Roboco sniped down Shion. Ayame, alone and cornered, scored a kill on a straggler before being taken out by her senpai. This was a grim reminder that, even if they are idols in the same company, this was a battlefield. It was kill or be killed, and so did our idols end up spilling each other's blood.
大丈夫、キル入ったんじゃない？
いや無理だな。
大丈夫だ。キル入ったよ。
キル入った。
オッケーオッケー。じゃあもう大丈夫。
While this big battle was happening, Team Lag was approached by enemies attempting to take their advantageous position. And this team was none other than Big Star themselves. Perhaps they thought they'd get some easy kills, overwhelming the defenders with their good aim. But in truth, they weren't the biggest fish in this pond. Our boys responded to their advance with calm and calculated play of their own, giving Big Star a run for their money.
シュートにないんだよな。なんでこっち打つんだ。
寄らんでいいまだ。
あ、来る来る来る来る来る来る来る来る来る来る。
はい了解了解。ポータルポータル。この下。
無理しないで無理しない。体すぎ体すぎ。割れた割れた割れた割れた割れた割れた割れた割れた。
ナイスナイス。
レイス割ったレイス割ったレイス割った。
ホライゾンやった。あとレイス。
レイス前レイス前レイス前に。あとジブだけあとジブだけ。
燃えてる燃えてる。
オッケー。
ナイス。
ジブ書いてたジブ書いてたジブ書いてた。
オッケーオッケー。
ポータルで書いてた。書き入れたよね。
あ、入れた入れた入れた。
上戻って上戻って上戻って上戻って。
はい。
取れるアイテムだけ取って帰るわ。ナイスナイスこれビッグスターね。
Ultimately, they managed to kill 2 of Big Star's members, sending the last running with their tail between their legs. Team Lag was a force to be contended with, and this would prove to be a welcome boost to their confidence. On the other side of the circle, Team TMS Go managed to resurrect Sumire, but this came at a great cost. To do so, they ended up tanking the circle's damage for a long time, and when they managed to get back inside, they were already at very low health. Unfortunately for them, Team Heroes of Bloodsucker Immortal, led by Kuzuha, the same team who had killed Kurumi in the first place, was there to block their path to the ring. The girls tried to fight back, but at a considerable disadvantage, ended up being eliminated. Things weren't looking up for Lag either. Their advantageous position was now unfortunately outside of the circle, and they had to move in. But the path ahead of them was treacherous and with very little cover. They entered a fight with a team who was blocking their way, and while fighting this team, they were simultaneously being sniped from the high ground by none other than Team Bamboozle. The boys tried to hold their ground, but yet another team approached them from behind. Outnumbered, with little cover and being sniped, it was too overwhelming, and Team Leg went down once again.
壊したごめん。
裏からも来てる裏からも来てる。
うわダウンした。いやきち。
Team Kansai Noises, who once again spent most of the match playing very carefully, hiding and taking potshots whenever they could, were attacked by Team Heroes of Bloodsuck and Immortal. There was no hiding, only one of the teams would come out on top. Robert started the fight with a well-placed crypto ultimate, breaking the enemy shields, but unfortunately it wasn't enough, and our boys from Kansai were taken down by the Tokyo Ghoul.
俺もワンダウン取られる。赤マーク赤マーク赤マークゲース。後ろ後ろ後ろ後ろ後ろ後ろ後ろ。
か後ろね。ここいるわ。レイス。
了解。
レイス中でずっといる。バッテリー巻いてる今。
じゃあ巻いてる。
レイスここね。
ドアロックできるかな。
うわめっちゃごめんマジでごめん。
いやーこ
マ
れ
ジでごめん。
ごめんなさい。
This left Team Bamboozle as the only survivors of Hololive production, but their luck was too coming to an end. The Circle, which had been largely favorable to them up to this point, finally decided to give them a hard time, forcing them into an uphill push. Unfortunately, it was too much, and the girls fell in battle.
これ右に集めとくからさ、前にそのまま行きたい。いや、なおちゃんの方頑張って。僕無理だ。でもさっきの下に降りてきたかも。挟まれた。いやー、くそー。
The circle was now extremely small, but a lot of teams were still alive. At this point, Leona's team, I Give You Jumpmaster, showed the strength of their consistency, and once again made it to top 5. Their positioning in the Fernal Circle was great, and Leona's use of Caustic's gas canisters proved once again to be extremely powerful, and these girls managed to snag the first place that was taken from them game 1. Everyone was back at the lobby. At this point, I Pass You Jumpmaster actually managed to overtake Team Big Star in score due to their second and first place finishes. Team Kansai Noises and Puikure were having a good time just bantering and enjoying the tournament. Matsuri might have had more unfortunate flashbacks of the first tournament, but otherwise Team TMS Go was still going alright. Asto was a bit frustrated at his own performance, but really, they were dealt a bad hand game 2 with that circle. After a few minutes passed, it was time for game 3 to begin. This time the ship started over the rift on the north side of the map. As per usual, the teams dropped in their predetermined positions. The match started with some light looting, and then we went straight into action, as Team Leg, who were rotating towards Hammond Labs, found themselves ambushed by an enemy squad. Arurandis nearly went down, so instead of fighting, the three decided to jump into the nearby Phase Runner, teleporting to the other side of the map. But they're not out of the water just yet, as they landed on top of another team right after teleporting. And as soon as they began to fight them, they realized that the team who shot Arurandis before chased them into the teleporter and were right behind them. Fortunately, they were in a pretty defensible position, and fearing a third party, the engagement comes to a brief stalemate.
登ってくる登ってくる。入って入って入ってまず入ってまず入って。あれさも。
今。
In the meantime, Rubble's team gets into a bit of a skirmish, but it's short-lived as the team they were fighting decides to run away. I can't stress how careful everyone was being at this point. The circle had already closed considerably, but barely anyone had died. Speaking of which, at this point Team Puikure was rotating towards the rift, and on the way they found another team. Having the high ground, they executed a successful ambush.
右曲がるよ。
オッケー。
多分右逃げてる右逃げてる。
やばい、シオンこれ壊せる。
オッケ
あー、1人70入ってる。うわ、マ
ど
ジか。
こピンさせる？
え、吹雪さんたち、吹雪さんたち。あー、ごめん。
Turns out the team they were fighting were none other than Bamboozle, and Ayame manages to take revenge on her senpai for having sniped her in the previous game. While this was happening, Team TMS approached the Pathfinder arena, where they found Leona's team. They fought, but perhaps lacking confidence at this point, Toa and Matsuri were swiftly taken down.
いいのか。ごめん、ちょっとやばい位置かもしれないけど。
ちょっとやばい時間まです。後ろ下だからね。私の方向に行けるよ。
逃げた方がいいかも。
Sumire attempted to make an escape, but ran into another team and went down too. Back to Team Lag, Esto decides that enough is enough and breaks the stalemate by coordinating a portal push with Yuzuru.
これ向こう逃げてった、向こう逃げてった。
はい。
一部結構入れてる。マジでスナイパーが今日強いよ。
ちょっと9じゃんじゃんたくね。
くれくれくれくれくれくれくれくれくれくれ。
はい。
割った割った一人割った一人割った一人割った。レイス割り。
もうすぐあと7秒売ると切れんの。
詰めるわ。詰める詰める詰める。
オッケー、詰めよう。
はい。
レイスやり。
ナイス。
ジブもめちゃめちゃ割れてる。
ジブダウン。
ナイス。
ここにホライゾン。俺側青シールド体にいっぱい入ってる。
やりやり。
ナイス。
They successfully overpowered the enemy squad and take them down. They quickly realized that other teams are attempting to enter the rift, which was now at the center of the increasingly small circle. This marks the beginning of a firefight between teams Lag, Puikure, Bamboozle, and YGR at the edge of the rift. Team Lag manages to isolate Team YGR inside of a house and goes in for a push. Team YGR certainly didn't go down without a fight, their caustic player making securing the kill very difficult for the boys, but ultimately they managed to take him down.
グレ投げる部屋の中。
俺一回ちょっとさ、バッテリー巻きたい。
部屋の中ガスこっち来てるガスこっち来てる。
俺バッテ巻いてるバッテ巻いてる。気をつけて。
クリプト超瀕死。
オッケー。
バッテ巻くバッテ巻く。スキャンあと1秒。
オッケー。
スキャン入れる。
スキャン欲しい。スキャン欲しい。
はい。
こっち逃げたんだ。
こっちについるよ、こっちについるよ。
了解。
グレあったら投げてほしい。グレあったら投げてほしい。
投げまくれ。
はい投げる。
壊すよ。
はい。
一人ダウン。
スキャンバンバンたくね。もうグレないもうグレない。
僕バッテマーク。あと一人あと一人。
だろ。
あと一人だよ。
はい。
冷静冷静冷静冷静冷静冷静冷静。
手に決まく
はい
手に決まく。二人でやれる。
今リロードしてる。
ナイス。
か
二人でやれるよ。
が入った。
オッケーやったやったやったやった。
ナイス。
俺こっち見てる。
中入っ
Team Bamboozle, who was surviving in the fringes for now, eventually runs out of places to hide as the circle becomes smaller and smaller. Roboco got isolated and taken down, and Noah tried to find cover inside of a nearby house. Unfortunately for her, the boys from Kansai Noises had been using that very house as their base of operations, and took her down in a 3v1.
たまんないまだ86。
アットパワフル多分詰めてくるんでこっちに
そうだね
ウルト間に入れて時間稼ぎますね。
ロベル君9設置しといて。
うん。
ここら辺に。
来てる。
オッケーオッケー、そっち行くそっち行くそっち行く。56割ってる。
ナイス。
ダウン。
周り見ます周り見ます。
They would continue in this house for the meantime, carefully scanning nearby routes and picking people off whenever they could. Team Puiker hurried to find a place in the circle, but unfortunately their path had them running in the large open field, where Yomi got taken down by sniper fire. Shion and Ayame tried to hide enough to get a better position in the scoreboard, but unfortunately were scanned by another team. Low on supplies and one gun down, the girls were taken out.
来るね。
ない。今あと3%だけど。
シオン。
あー、やばい。
あー、ごめん。
Right after that, the same team who pushed and killed Shion and Ayame went topside where they found Lag, having just finished a long fight against Team YGR. Unfortunately, our boys found themselves cornered in the same position their recently slain enemies were, and fell victim to a coordinated shotgun pincer attack. This left Team Kansai Noises as the sole survivors yet again. Their strategy of playing carefully and methodically was paying off in a way. Unfortunately, this is a battle royale, and you can't ignore your enemies forever. So long as there are 2 teams left on the map, someone is going to want someone dead. With the circle now extremely small, our boys were ambushed by none other than the virtual gorilla himself when trying to advance. Fight as they might, they were taken down by his primordial might, having their team finish in the 6th place.
待ってるよ。
オッケーオッケーオッケー。
一発入ってる。
オッケーオッケー。
ポータルあります。
来て来て来て来て、入って入って入って。ごめん、やったわ。戻って一回戻っていいかも。
一回戻るよ。
入ってんな。でもう一回行って。いやーごめん。
ゴリラさんだ。ルベル君
頑張れ
頑張れ。
生き延びればいい。生き延びて生き延びて。
お前なんだよね。
頑張れ。
いや申し訳ねえ。申し訳ねえ。
俺がマジ頑張ったわ今。
The match wouldn't last much longer after they died, however. In an incredibly chaotic final circle, with fertility raining from above, a bloody battle was fought by the remaining teams, with PKO's team, at Powerful, claiming victory over the 3rd match of the tournament. Things were, once again, not looking good for Hololive Productions. For Team Kansai Noises and Team Puicure, it didn't seem to be that big of a deal. They were here to fight as hard as they could, and to have some fun along the way. If you're going to watch any of this stream for banter's sake, I'd recommend one of these 2 squads, who maintained a positive energy all the way through. The same couldn't be said for the other 3 teams. Team Bamboozle was becoming silent, disillusioned. I imagined Roboco and Fubuki couldn't help but feel a bit guilty for holding Noah back. After all, she was the 2nd most powerful individual player in the tournament. Team TMS, at this point, had lost nearly all momentum. They tried to stay positive, but it was clear at this point that it was starting to get to them. Toa had been noticeably nervous the whole tournament, and who could blame her? It was her first time participating in something like this. For Matsuri, it was even more tragic. This entire thing felt like a big flashback to the first tournament. Matsuri had big expectations for herself back then, and now she was falling short again. Team Lag, on the other hand, on the surface kept a clear mind, but you can notice their energy levels going down. I'll explain their main weakness. Astel is a pretty damn good Apex player, one of the best in Holopro when it comes to Royale skill. Izuru is also good, and Adodandis is a relative newbie compared to them, but he was trying his best. The main problem is that Astel, God bless his soul, is a bit too hot-headed for his own good. Most teams in a tournament, after securing kills, would lay low and try to survive, but not Astel. With him commanding the team, they went in for push after push, regardless of whether or not it was a good idea. Players like Astel need someone who is more defensively minded, someone who is used to playing on the same wavelength as them, and backhit their pushes up, but also to keep them on a leash, and tell them when it's time to stand down. To Astel, this someone was the final member of the Chibi-Stars, Kira, who had graduated. Kira managed to save Astel whenever he got himself in a bad spot. He covered his pushes and gave the call to fall back whenever necessary. He was the balancing factor that Astel needed, but alas, he wasn't here. With Astel taking the position of squad leader, survival wasn't their top priority, and they ended up getting into regrettable positions over and over. Mind you, this is not a diss on Adorandis, not at all. He might be a new player, but he trained hard and did everything he could to fill the very big shoes left for him. But at the same time, I'm sure that if the Chibi-Stars who held that building in this last game of the first tournament were here, their standings would be different. With all the Holopro teams in mediocre positions on the scoreboard, it was time for Game 4 to begin. This time, the ship started over Bonsai Plaza, heading towards the docks. Team TMS decided to go with an unorthodox strategy. They abandoned their predetermined drop at Elysium and decided to drop at the docks. Remember what I said about early game fights being really bad in Apex? Since they didn't drop at their predetermined position, they ended up contesting their drop with team I didn't do anything. Sadly, it seems that when it rains it pours, and it was certainly the case for the girls. Having found very little loot, they encountered their enemies who were already geared up with high-level shields. Scattered and unarmed, they didn't stand much of a chance and were eliminated almost immediately. Meanwhile, Team Kansai Noises got themselves in an early fight, something that betrayed their strategy from the games up until now. The battle had Inui going down, but the boys kept their heads clear and stayed focused on the conservative approach they had up until now, fighting defensively and getting their comrade back.
めちゃめちゃ止まるめちゃ
ドームナイス。
OK 了解勝ってくれこれはもう願うしかない
おいやだよ俺こんなので大会が1試合が終わるの俺2人でやっててよあ白終わった肉
それ敵言うといいぞいけるぞ
ドーム溜まります。3秒。
OK 下がってるかも敵
いや下がった。
足音聞こえない
いや今滑球取ればよかった。しまった。
まだセカンド
The fight continued for a while, but a third team showed up, which made the Kansai boys retreat into a house. And with none of the teams willing to commit to a push, the skirmish ended in a stalemate. While this was happening, the boys from Team Lag maintained their strategy of looting fast and going for early kills. They moved to estates, a usually heavily contested area, and sure enough, found an enemy team. With no hesitation, they went in for their signature aggressive push.
いる全然いる。レイス金ドーム焚いてる。
ジム割れかけ。
はい。
上登ってる。
レイス割れた。
はい。
あごめん。あとレース。落ち着き。
レースどこ？
レース逃げてった。回復しよう。
They caught the enemy team off guard and managed to successfully kill 2 of them, but unfortunately the third one was playing Wraith and managed to slip away. Switching perspectives to the girls over at Team Bamboozle, they were having a relatively safe game, up until they decided to advance towards the center of the map. On the way, Roboco entered a house where, much to her surprise, Team Big Star was waiting for them. Roboco quickly fell, and Fubuki and Noah tried to run away. Unfortunately, Fubuki got taken down in the process, but Noah managed to slip away, once again becoming the sole survivor. Back to Robo, Team Kansai Noises were still locked in the same stalemate, defending a house. However, one of the teams decided to finally make a push. Unfortunately for our boys, that team had a caustic, and his poisonous gas gave them the edge they needed to win against Kansai Noises.
俺は抑えます。
はい
ありがと
はいよ
来てる。2人割った瀕死。
なんで
う
こんなガスが来るの
ガスはまずいわ
こっちに逃げる一回
格差取られてる
いや決めきれんな。
While this was happening, Team Lag started to rotate towards the circle. The boys kept a low profile and tried to sneak towards the circle, but ended up meeting an enemy and getting to a firefight with them. They take a defensive position inside a house, and it quickly becomes clear that one of the team's players, Wraith, was not normal. It might sound ridiculous, but experienced Apex players can tell the skill level of their enemies at a glance by the way they move, the pushes they take, their aim, and it was clear that this person was experienced. That was because it was no person at all. It was the bane of Hololive, the virtual gorilla. But this time, the boys were ready for him. They started by taking down Gorilla's teammates and leaving him isolated. Astel went in for the kill.
ナイスカットしてる。
ゴリラさんとこにいる。
オッケー
ゴリラさんとこにいる。待て。
9あと9たける。はい行くよ。おい
多分上だ。
左逃げてる。
これもう国内よ。
51入れた。ナイス。
敵来た。別。
They had done it. They took down the gorilla. The primal menace was no more, Hololive Productions, after all these months, had finally been avenged. Not everything was going well for Holopro though. Team Koukaku, who so far had a quiet game, decided to take some potshots at a faraway team. Unfortunately for them, their shooting drew the attention of another team who ambushed them from behind. Shion was swiftly taken down in the ambush, and the other two girls ran away, but there was no avoiding a fight. Ayame and Yomi managed to take one of their assailants down, but Yomi is killed in the process. Ayame decided to run away, but unfortunately, with the circle being so small, found another team and was also taken out. While this was happening, Team Leg pondered their next move. They had a few kills, so it made sense to hang back for a while, try to get a better placement on the scoreboard. But this was Team Leg. Under Astel's guidance, there would be no holding back. They would keep moving forward, until their enemies were destroyed. While this eagerness is commendable and makes them fun to watch, perhaps they were a little too excited from having killed Gorilla, as they decided to risk it all on a fight against Team Deep Cliffs Club. They managed to take Oda Nobunaga down, but unfortunately their positioning wasn't very good, and they ended up losing the fight, being eliminated.
うわ、玉抜けしやがった。
ナイス。いやーやばい、自分。
いや、マジか。R さん、待てか。いやー、どまい。
This left Noah as the sole survivor of the Holopro teams. She was scuttling around, trying to avoid being found. She took cover behind a house where she could hear the footsteps of an entire team inside. She managed to hide for a while, but eventually they too heard her footsteps and went after her. Outnumbered 3-1 against Leona's team, she too went down. The final circle had Team I Pass You Jumpmaster once again getting to the very end, where they faced off against Team I Didn't Do Anything. Unfortunately for them, Leona's team was down one person, which ultimately gave Team I Didn't Do Anything the edge, earning them a well-deserved victory. There was only one game left. Most of Holopro was at the back end of the scoreboard. Team Bamboozle got themselves a decent middle spot, and Team Leg was once again climbing through the ranks. But tensions were high in every lobby. It was clear that Matsuri was disappointed with her performance, and this being her second tournament only compounded those feelings. Feeling the energy levels dropping to an all-time low, Towa-sama decided to cheer her teammates by loudly singing a song. It was devilishly adorable. Feeling a bit better after having a laugh at Towa, Matsuri and Sumire readied themselves for Game 5. In the meantime, in Team Leg's lobby, the mood was strange. Astel felt like he wasn't being good enough of a team leader as he could have been. It was a bit frustrating for him and Izuru. After their first tournament, they really wanted to shine bright their second time in. But the boys weren't about to give up. That was enough moping around. With a final let's go from Astel, Game 5 began. Game 5 was off to a slow start. Being the deciding game for the tournament and every team's last chance, it was understandable that everyone was playing pretty carefully. Team Koukaku did enter a bit of a skirmish, but nothing really came from it. The first big battle for Holopro had Team Kansai Noises cornered outside of the circle by none other than Team TMS, who had rotated faster than them. The boys were stuck between a rock and a hard place, but they did their best to slowly advance and push back their assailants. Unfortunately for them, another team came from behind, arriving late to the circle. It was none other than Team Big Star. Ambushed and forced to push, they were easy pickings for Team TMS, who took 2 of them down before Uruha finished off the last one. Having used their resources fighting the boys from Kansai, TMS decided not to engage Big Star, and with a well-placed airstrike from Sumire managed to retreat. While this was happening, Team Bamboozle got in a bit of a skirmish themselves. Having found their enemies out of position, the girls managed to go in for a push and take them down.
これ行くね。いいよ。ジブラルトで狙ってほしいな。ジブ割れてる。ジブやった。後ろから。
However, they started being shot from behind by another squad, but thanks to a quick portal placed by Noah, they fortunately managed to escape. In the meantime, Team Lag was looking for kills, but being more cautious than they were in the past games. They got in a fight against the team at Solar Array, but having realized that another team was nearby, they ended up backing off, so as to not risk a third-party elimination. Instead, Esto gave the call for them to sneak around and take a position at a high ground leading to the circle. This gave them a crucial advantage against the team below, who had to fight an uphill push to get to safety. Blessed by this superior positioning, they managed to take them down.
ワンやりワンやりワンやりワンやり。
ナイス。一人紫だな。2階にいるやつ。
あ、アルサあれ撃てる。アルサあれ撃てる。
撃ってるけど当たらん。ごめん。
やりきったやりきった。
大丈夫そっち。
下のジブもやった。一人ね、下は一人だもうダウンさせてる。
While this was happening, Team Bamboozle had trouble spelled out for them. Unfortunately, they were in a really bad position relative to the circle. They tried getting via the theoretically easiest route, but a team was already waiting for them there, which cost Noah her life. Roboco and Fubuki had no choice but to run back to the circle and go around, but things wouldn't get easier from there. They were once again far from the circle, and ahead of them was one of the largest open areas in the map. The two girls ran frantically, managing to take down a solo along the way, taking fire from every direction. They ran fast, they ran as far as they could, but ultimately, there were just too many teams, and Team Bamboozle went down for the last time.
もう僕たちは敵はありません。敵がいません。敵いない。敵いないんです。いやごめん、いけロコ先輩。ごめん。それもうすごい後ろだ。いやもう来てる来てる追ってきてる追ってきてる追ってきてる追ってきてる。こんにちはこんにちは。あげるあげるあげる。頑張れ逃げろ。全部あげる全部あげる。いやー。
The match was far from over though. As if written on a script, the final battle of the last game would be the most intense in the tournament so far. The final circle ended up at Bonsai Plaza, a very difficult area to enter, as you only have one big choke point entrance in the center and two small entrances to the sides, and there's plenty of high ground everywhere for you to get shot from. The first of the remaining Holopro teams to attempt to get in was TMS. They used a portal from Toa to attempt advancing into the central choke point, while trading shots with a team perched on the high ground. On the other side of the choke point was Team Lag, who saw this opportunity for a third party. The girls, now being shot from another direction, realized this was a bad idea, using defensive artillery to cover the retreat and head back to the portal and attempt an entrance for the other side. Astel's team made use of this commotion to sneak into the circle from the other side, and use a Wraith portal to cross the dangerous no man's land between them and the buildings. Of course, they weren't the first team there, as the building was already occupied and filled with caustic gas. However, with the circle on their backs, this position proved relatively safe for the time being. On the other side of the building, using some stairs as cover, was Team Puicure, who, having been blessed with excellent luck, were at Bonsai Plaza since the very early stages of the game. But their position was precarious, with many angles to get shot from, including an angle exploitable by Team Lag. Right next to them, inside of a small building, was Team TMS, who managed to get in via the side entrance and was hiding for the meantime. Team Lag realized that they weren't getting inside of that building filled with caustic gas, so they instead went around, taking a route that would pit them against their Holopro compatriots. It wasn't long before Team Puicure was shot in the back by Team Lag. Right as they began shooting back, Team TMS didn't hesitate and pounced at the opportunity. Sumire shotgunned all girls from Puicure, taking them out. However, by this point, Leg had already advanced and was ready for a fight. The boys struck swiftly and decisively, with Astel mowing the 3 girls down with precise bursts from his R99 SMG.
ってきてるやついる。
バッテリー巻いてるバッテリー巻いてるバッテリー巻いてるごめんごめんごめんごめん来てるよ
やったもう間違えた間違
It had been a long, bloody path. The first tournament spared us of Holo Pro members killing each other, but this time our heroes crossed paths, and there could only be one left standing. It was poetic then that the last beacon of hope for Holo Pro was Team Lag. The remnants of the Chibi Stars, the highest placing team within Hololive Productions. They reloaded their guns. There was a team to the right, a few more high up on a suspended structure. They knew where the enemy was coming from. Astel took a deep breath. Certainly, at this moment, Kira was watching them. There's no narration necessary for these final moments, so instead I'll just let them play out.
た降りてきたすぐ降りてきたオッケーここ冷静に行こう冷静に行こう
こんな状況ね。
ここ登れるからね、
はい
登れるからね
はいよ。
ウルト焚きますこれ僕のウルトです
はい。
前ドーム焚きます前ドームこっち来て
はい。ついてきます。
食らってる左奥で食らってる左奥でこれ木の下木の下木の下
左奥ね
ワンダウンワンダウンワンダウン
スキャンタグ、バンバンスキャンタグよ。
ジブ必死ジブ必死ジブ必死これ敵ウルト敵ウルト敵ウルト
敵ウルトね。
右来て右来て右来て右来て
オッケー
右行ってる。はい。
このなんかパラソルの下
レオナさん瀕死レオナさん瀕死
やりやりやりやり
左左左。あ、ごめん、ガスでダウンした。任せる。こっちから見えないね。俺めちゃくちゃ回復とか持ってるから。
やべ
グレは
これねいずるねこの真上にいるわ大丈夫よ大丈夫
いけるぞ。落ち着いて。
いずる起こせるあ無理か
冷静に。
いやもう無理かもなもう無理もう無理もう無理もう無理入ってるいてこあーまあいいか大丈夫いけるいけるいけるいける
いけるよ。冷静にね。
虚空でもいいよ虚空でもいいぞまだね
いい背中だいい背中だ。いいマッシフだ。
信じてる
冷静にね冷静にね。
やべさっき来ちゃった
いや全然落ち着ける全然落ち着ける。冷静にね。
ハト
この後
どんまい頑張った
GG 頑張った。
いや頑張った
全然頑張ったこれは
全然頑張ったいや全然頑張った僕
Second place. They fought hard. Arurandis was the first to go down. Then Astel unfortunately was hit by an enemy caustic's grenade and fell right after. Izuru, being the last man standing, fought to his last breath, mastiff in hand, but was outnumbered and ended up being taken down by Team Deep Kiss Club. A good, but at the same time bitterly frustrating second place finish. It wasn't for naught though. Their many kills, perseverance, and second place finish had our boys skyrocketing up the leaderboards, and once again obtained the 5th place ranking for Hololive, just as they had in the first tournament. There was a bit of trouble when counting their overall score for the tournament, but after some deliberation, a tie was decided between teams that didn't do anything, and I passed to Jumpmaster for the first place finish. Both of them were amazingly consistent, surviving to the very end every game, and their victory was well deserved. And hey, Team TMS even got a bit of a consolation prize. This tournament had a special ruling where the team in 16th place overall would win a tuned up gaming PC, and that was Team TMS. Well, because of the trouble with the scores, Team Kansai Noises also ended up being kind of 16th place too, so to avoid any bad feelings, they also went home with a gaming PC of their own. In Team Lag's lobby, Astel finally couldn't hold it back anymore and let it all out. He apologized for not being the best team captain, he apologized for his lack of experience, and he cried his eyes out. Arurandis tried cheering him up, but ended up crying too. The result was good, but also bittersweet. They knew they could have done better. And maybe they could have, But you know what? Once again, Esto and Izuru managed to climb to the top 5. There are things you only learn by doing, and failing is part of the process. Esto did his best, and so did Izuru and Arurandis. I'm sure Kira is proud of them. And the day wasn't over yet, as later they would be having the post-tournament mixer matches, where everyone except for Team Puikuru participated. Just like last time, they were a lot of fun, but I won't be covering them. And after those games ended, Esto, Izuru, and Arurandis decided to finish the day off in the only way they knew how, with one final 100 kill endurance stream. There's not much point in making a where there are now segment like last time, because the tournament happened not too long ago. But it is worth noting that it seems to have sparked a new fire in Apex Legends within the company. Fubuki and Roboko are playing Apex together late into the night in some very comfy streams, and Ayame even joined them for one of them. Matsuri is still playing as much as she ever did, and of course, Estoleda is not about to give up in being the best player he can be, with his crazy 12-hour Apex/singing hybrid streams, where he attempts to climb all the way to Master Rank, with Izuru ever by his side. Now, all we can do is cheer them all on, and wait for the next tournament to begin. If you liked this video, consider leaving a like to help me out, and subscribe if you'd like to see more. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.